This is a little off topic, but David Ramsey brought his 9825A. So I've got this up. This is my office when it's clean. And that's 9825A in the middle, but that's a different keyboard. That's called the chiclet keyboard. That's got the, it's harder to type with, but it just looks good. Anyway, today what I did is, you guys are an inspiration. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Vladik says hello. I saw him Thursday night. I arrived into Vancouver Friday morning. I sent an email out saying, yes, it's to be announced, but you better pull me off the speakers list because life has just been too hectic. So I arrived Thursday morning. I had a set of bags at the office. I walked in, changed uniform, threw those bags in the office, grabbed the second set of bags, went to the airport. Had 3.5 hours to kill. Hey, I finally got some free time in the last couple of months, so I came up with the following talk. Which button am I pushing? Bottom one. Bottom one. That's interesting. So we're going to talk about the HP-01 Cricket. That's the code name for the HP-01. It's the first watch. It's the only watch they made, although there is an HP-02 prototype out there, which was going to be an LCD panel. We'll explain why in a minute. So Felix, over there, I've got 3 watches right in front of you. Yeah, those 3. Oh, don't pretend you can't see them and that are lost already. We're going to hand them around. First of all, Gunter, is he here? Did you get your 42S back?
It hasn't been around yet.
It hasn't been around yet. Okay, hold off. He's holding it up until he gets his calculator back, because I don't trust
installing.
I've got 3 functioning watches here. One's the HP-01, and we're going to talk about the past, present, and future. And the future is, if you remember last year's talk, by Bernhard Ems. This guy is amazing. He's reconfigured every single Woodstock ever made, and we're going to talk about that for 5 seconds at the very end. Well, we're going to talk about those guys right now. For the heck of it, you've probably been dropping by the desk when I was in the back. That's an HPO clamshell case. I've got all the paperwork, all the guarantees, all the everything that goes with it. That was hard to find. And then I assembled the whole kit together. The second watch you're going to see is a competitor called Pulsar. Beautiful clamshell. We'll talk about the construction. This is not the original Seiko box. It was wooden. You're going to see a Seiko coming by also. All of them are functioning, and I've restored every single one of them. So there's the HP-01 if you're not familiar. That's in the stopwatch mode. It's 0. That's why it's 0:00 decimal. So hours, minutes, whatever. We'll get there in a second. That's displayed on a close-up also, a stopwatch display. Don't touch that. And there's the posse so far. None of those were working. So I pulled them all apart, put them all back together, cleaned up traces. Actually had to repaint some traces on some of them. Now, the #1 competitor, and actually the world's first calculator watch, was the Pulsar. Stainless steel case, solid stainless steel lugs, LED display, very large, very bright, but it's what we commonly call a 4-banger. 4 357 silver oxide batteries to power this. Again, the display probably goes at 6 months. Very inconvenient that way. You got to push a button to see the display, etc. It only has 6 digits. It's no scientific notation. At the same time, in 1975, out comes Seiko. Now this is a pretty machine. Solid stainless steel with an aluminum fascia board. You're going to see the black version going around when you look at them. Are they being passed around there, Felix, or are they just sitting in front of you? Okay, you're supposed to. Oh, you're waiting?
We're following your instructions.
Okay, pass them around now, Felix, please. So the Seiko, that's their first. And again, solid stainless steel construction, no folded over cheap bands or bracelets. Beautifully made, every aspect of that Seiko. There are 32 screws in there. The light bulb comes up, you can replace it. While the ICs come up, you can replace them. Made to be repaired. Now, if you are going to repair an HP-01, these are the tools you're going to use. You can see the pliers, the hammer, the grease gun. We've got a grinding wheel there, isopropyl alcohol. We have some sandpaper. And in this little, is there a laser? Uh-oh. Well, that's backwards. Oh, there you go. You can see right here there's a box. It says watch in the box. That's what's in the box. That's what happens when you disassemble it. So how do we get to this point? how do we get a fishing and tackle box full of HP-01 parts on the middle of the workbench in the garage, which, by the way, is clean and tidy, believe it or not. Yeah, talk to my wife. She doesn't believe it either. So there you go. Just a close-up of the tools that you need that are required, and of course a little trucky thing there.
How is the Enterprise used in the repair process?
It's not at all. I just threw that in there as a look. Yeah, for somebody like Bob to say, how is the Enterprise involved in here? And by the way, that's the Canadian version. We invented Star Trek. Because without Kirk, it's not Star Trek. Now, let's start with the standard rolled gold plate. Now, the construction of these. We all seen gold-plated watches. Lower quality gold-plated watches are gold plate on base metal. Base metal may be brass, maybe pot steel, or anything. This is gold plate on stainless steel. So that's a stainless steel plate. Not only is it gold plate, in this case it's rolled gold plate, it's actually a solid gold shell heated and compressed onto the stainless steel. Solid gold is much denser than gold plate for what do you call that stuff? Electroplating. As a result, it doesn't allow sweat and acids to get to the base metal. But even in this case, if it did get to the base metal, it's stainless steel. It won't rot like the brass watches, etc. So this one was non-functional, pretty messed up. You can see right here somebody took a pair of pliers to it to change the batteries because they didn't have the little battery package and or Jamie Donnelly's beautiful wrenches, which we have now. So I'm going to take a look at this, note the strategies, etc. We can go quickly through these. That's a oh shoot. Yes, Richard.
The two different depths are to rest
I will
non-standard tools or anything?
I will get to that right now. That's why this slide's up. There are two different depths to the back of this the HP. You will see a groove here and a groove here and a little pit in each one of these. In fact, no, I don't talk about it there, so I'll take that off. What happens, and I see this a lot, right in here is the back of the piezo buzzer, the bender. It's actually exposed from those grooves for noise, so you can hear the alarm. Then the edge is sealed, so there is some waterproof, water resistance on that. Now, if you take a pair of pliers or the wrong wristwatch wrench, case back, you puncture the piezo, or you lift it from the back inside, and I'm going to show you that. And now out goes your waterproof, sweat's going in, etc. So you have to have the right tools for these. So obviously you have the right tool, because there's the piezo. So you can see that that little hole there is the exposed bender. So now we're looking at, oh, wow. Where was I? Here we go. So now we're going to look at what happens when you see the back. So there's the buzzer. Obviously there's a contact here that contacts the buzzer to complete the circuit. I'm going to call it a buzzer. These two batteries sit here, battery sits here, and there's a swivel piece of insulation, plastic, dust protector, whatever. You have to swing that out. The plastic film. Hey, if I just keep following the slides, it actually explains it. So we got battery housing in detail, quartz crystal chamber, and the quartz crystal resides under this. This is very important. It's in a little compartment underneath this module. We have a reset button and your buzzer button. Now, if you haven't got the original tools, you have to fabricate tools. We're going to want, our intention is to pull this battery module out. There are actually two rings here, which we'll get a look at, but I had to take a nice pair of tweezers, cut the ends off, bend them, file them, so they came in at 90 degrees to fit these slots, because they're very narrow slots. This is where people go wrong. This is the most important part of the entire demo. So I swung that little plastic thing out of the way, and I'm pointing out that there are two rings here. There's a little slot at the end of that arrow, and there's a slot here. There are actually two separate screwing rings. The inside ring is holding the module in place and compressed into the circuit board. You have to release that ring, pull the module out, then the second ring releases the module and the case into two pieces and allows you to pull the module itself out. So we'll step through that quickly because this isn't sitting here and training you how to work on watches. This is showing you what's happening on the inside. So a standard watchmaker guy who doesn't have a manual, which they don't exist, doesn't understand this. So I took the tweezers that I modified, pulled out the inside ring, leaving the outside ring in place. As you turn this ring, the module will want to turn with it. Big mistake. So we have to hold that module in place while you're turning that ring out and releasing it. Once the ring is out, the module comes out. Now you can see what's underneath the module. There's a 784 kilohertz quartz crystal soldered on 2 legs. There's a battery spring. There's a trimming capacitor. And you find out there are 2 tiny springs here which are contacting 2 pads. You don't have to get into the technology, but you can see that there are things hiding under the module. And if that module turns, you're ripping those off. I have time for a quick story. Anybody here heard of Lou Doran? Okay, yes, I knew you had. Lou Doran worked for HP in 1975. I didn't know this. I got a phone call 3.5 years ago on a Friday at 9 in the morning, and this guy calls me up out of the blue and says, "Geoff, Quickfall." I said, "Yes." He says, "My name's Lou Doran. You've probably heard of me." I said, "Well, actually, no, I haven't. What are you selling?" He said, "Well, I'm not selling anything, but have you heard of CD4s, FM multiplexing, DVD4s, and quadraphonic sound?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "I have patents. Those are my patents. I have over 200 patents in the audio industry. And I used to work for HP." So the light goes on in my head. I said, HP. What's this about? And he says, "Well, I have this watch. It's engraved in the back, from Bill Hewlett. It says, 'From Bill to Lou, all the best.'" And I retired in '75 from HP and started my own business in sound staging and sound technology, etc. And I said, "Well, now I understand why you're calling. Let me fill in the blank for you, Lou. Somebody decided to change the batteries, and then while they were changing the batteries, they thought, we'll take a little bit step forward, we'll take the module out, we'll clean up the circuits, we'll put all that together, and now it doesn't work." And he said, "Yeah, that was my son." I said, "So what I want you to do is I want you to box it up, use ABC, I'll say the words, use, well, no, it's just going on the web. Use this company to send it to me, not that company, because that company leaves it on the doorstep. This company will send it to me, give me the sign for it, and I want you to mark it wristwatch, vintage wristwatch for repair and return. That way I won't get dinged the $500 because you're going to insure this puppy." He says, no, I'm not going to do that. "Are you home this afternoon?" I said, "Well, yes, I am. Why, are you in Vancouver?" "Oh, no, I'm in LA. I'm going to send my airplane up." 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I open the door, there's this guy with 4 bars on his shoulders. He says, "You Geoff Quickfall?" I see some ID, I show it to him. He says, "Here." Lou says, "Hello." And he flies his airplane back to LA. So I got this watch, I throw it under the microscope, and sure enough, right there on that one long leg on that quartz crystal, because he didn't carefully remove that ring, there was a cold solder joint now, that I could wiggle the wire. Solder.
You're in America, you're in the US.
You guys let me alone with my pronunciations already. You guys. Anyway, so the soldering connection obviously let go. Probably a cold solder. Is that a cold or a cold solder? A cold solder joint. Let go and release. So I went zap, reassembled it. It was working. So then I disassembled it completely, cleaned up all the finish, restored the finish. We'll get to that. Well, that's removing the other ring. So this is the little start. Restored it, sent it back to him on Wednesday, and the next day I used that other company. And he got it back, and then he said, "What do I owe you?" And I said, "Well, I don't charge for this stuff. I'm writing a book." And it's information. But while I've got you here, what's with a 784 kilohertz quartz crystal? That's a pain in the neck, because everybody here has got a 32 kilohertz crystal. Or if you're really well off, you got a 2.4 megahertz crystal. The higher the frequency in this day cut, the more current it took to drive it, but the more accurate it was. They failed, though, because they put a trimming capacitor in here. A trimming capacitor is notorious for temperature. So if it's set and it's always on your wrist, it's going to be around 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Always. Even in the winter. It's pretty amazing. So once you set the trimming capacitor for the temperature of your wrist, you're great. As soon as you take it off, it goes wonky. I like the HP-01C, the accuracy factor. And the world's first digital LED watch that was solar powered called the Synchronar had an accuracy factor, not a trimming capacitor. So let's get back to this watch. That's the end of that story. Let's get back to this watch. So now we're going to pull the module up. Yes, it's all upside down. These, by the way, are not pictures from the book. I did this for an online magazine. So now I've pulled that whole module apart. I've now got the module residing with this spring system, in this ring in here. And this ring has a split, which is very interesting because look at that split. You actually lift the split, and then you thread that out. So the ring comes out, and now you're left with just the module sitting, which now gets pried out. And there's the module. The module's now out. Now you can see, these are problematic. I didn't bring every piece of HP because that's in the book. I just going to make this quick. This is actually 2 porcelain plates epoxied together, and all the ICs reside in between the 2 porcelain plates. They're connected by a ribbon, but also they're connected by tunnels. So where you see a dot, a round circle in here, those are all tunnels bored through the porcelain in gold to the IC. So when you get battery damage on this, you can lose your traces. And on the surface, that's easy. You can jump with micro soldering, or you can paint traces. I've got a jar of gold, real gold trace paint. That was expensive. Wife doesn't know. Oh, she does now. Oh no. So we have just the problematic parts. What can you repair on this watch? Well, nobody makes the LEDs. That's the back part of the LEDs. But these are easy to get. You can fabricate something like that. But there's really not much you can repair. As far as the 700s, this is the same quartz crystal you find in the HP-55. And if you modify your HP-45, you need a 784 kilohertz. So I asked Lou, what is with that? And he said, oh, we have boxes of those. I said, what about 32 kilohertz? He says, but that's not the business we were in. The business we were in was frequency dividing. So 784 kilohertz apparently, and I'm not a techno person either, is divisible for frequency and radio working, whereas 32 kilohertz is better for timing and 60-second, 60-minute functions. He says, but that's just a coding problem in the IC. It just changed the division rate. So he ended up sending me a box of these because the Chinese manufacturer wanted 20,000 or something, and I said, no, it's 10 cents a piece, because how many of these am I going to be fixing? So here is what happens when you take it apart correctly. Here's what happens when you don't take it apart correctly. I bought this off eBay for $250, classic, untested. Yes, right, we all know what that means. You put the batteries in it, you test it, it doesn't work, so at worst it's untested. Well, I know it's probably broken. I only buy broken things on eBay. That's the only way you know what you're getting. So, what happened here is, I hit the wrong button, what happened here is, you will see this little battery with the reset spring is missing, the trimming capacitor is missing, and where did that quartz crystal go? And this watch case, which is why I bought it, is absolutely pristine out of the factory. They took that ring, and they rotated with the battery module, and they sheared all 3 of those surface mounts off. I've got this running, by the way. So, just the you'll find 2 little gaskets in there. One's square, obviously. The other one's round. I'm still trying to figure out which is which. There is an original HP module on the keyboard side. You see this kind of design in Casio high-end calculators, unfortunately, with the springs and the contacts. But in this, it's pretty well the other way. These are all gold traces. This is the keyboard on the porcelain substrate. These are the spring contacts, which contact and complete the circuit. Underneath the spring contact is a plastic sheet with holes in it. I actually got an HP-01 that didn't work, that was missing that sheet. So I made one, and now it works. And by the way, that one is a prototype. There are no serial numbers or markings on the case back. And the 80-year-old guy was on the project team who sent it to me. Okay, so this is the original board. You can see the LED. I think Bernhard has counted the segments, because when you are using Bernhard's new module, which we'll get to, you have to harvest this. This is free-floating. It comes off in your hand. This insulator comes off in your hand, and the rest of it you throw out. That's if it's unrestorable. So, that's what's underneath the keyboard. Now this is really a pain in the neck, and I'll get to it. This is your second major failure point when you're taking these apart. Ask me how I know. That rubber gasket is in the back, and it's epoxy in place. Oh. It's a rubber diaphragm. It's not plastic, it's not hard. It has square holes with round things and square keys. I failed that test in grade 2. You know, the pegs and the, okay, forget it. Anyway, I thought on this one, which was toast and garbage, I'd take it apart for the book and see what's inside. If you take this watch apart and you do not support the back of that while you're playing with it, those little things, well, no, what they do is they rotate. They're in the rubber, because I'm not going to take the rubber off ever again. But the rubber sags. And one of these little puppies will fall out of its square and rotate. And you're sitting there now thinking, okay, how do I get this back? And do I use orthodontist plasticine on a toothpick? Do I put a little crazy glue? Do I use a metal? I don't want. I got to grab it, rotate it, get it back. Oh, then the 3 around it are now gone. And at that point I thought, well, let's just remove this and create a technique to remove it so that I can put it in the book. And that's not in the book because there is no technique to remove it. That little rubber thing, in fact, is actually ripped in half. Yes, sir?
What about a vacuum tweezers?
Anyway, as I was saying, there's such a thing as a vacuum tweezer. Like, I didn't know that. Moving on, this is how I came up with. So you take a wedge of tinfoil. In fact, I've actually modified that. I have a piece of wood now. Cut. This is going to fit in here perfectly. That's the back of that rubber gasket. And it's going to wedge in, and it's going to hold it so I can play with the case.
So you never want to remove that.
You never want to remove the rubber gasket, because it's how do you actually cook the epoxy? Heat epoxy, it comes off beautifully. How do you get that epoxy off without destroying the rubber? How do you put a solvent in there without destroying the rubber? So, how do you get it off without doing any of those? You rip it. So, this protects those keys from floating because you're supporting them as the module does when it's complete and put together. So, now I've got the guts out. They're on the side. We'll take a look at them in a minute. That's the case crystal on one of the watches I did. This one ended up on the Antiques Roadshow English version. He called me up and he said, you watch the Antiques Roadshow, they're interviewing me. He's got about 500 LED wristwatches, the new collectibles. And I restored his name is Mr. Frequency. I restored his and they interviewed him on the Antiques Roadshow in my HP-01. It was right there front and center. He didn't say that to them. So how do we replace these?
You're so funny.
Well, I went to Hong Kong and I asked them, then I went to Beijing and I asked them, and then I called up HP Legal and said, I found a guy who's going to make these screens to put Hewlett Packard on. HP Legal said, are you kidding me? We have your address now. 3 conversations, so no, that didn't happen. And then the manufacturer said, I got to order 20,000 of them. And I said, but I only want to fix 5. So I had to come up with another process. So here's the process. I don't want to protect the rubber. I want to protect the keys and the bezel, which is the fascia plate. So I wrapped it. Found out later, actually don't have to do that. Took a hair dryer, heated up the crystal to melt the epoxy. Off comes the crystal. Rubbing alcohol, isopropanol, whatever, cleans up the rest of the remnant of the epoxy. And then I turned it upside down and put it back in.
Really?
That's the same crystal. Of course, it's pristine underneath. Now, the only problem here is those are pretty big gashes. Yeah. If they line up over an LED display, you're going to have distortion. It didn't. So there's the new crystal,
Wow.
flipped. On the other hand, once I got that crystal in, it fractured along one of those cracks. So I had to come up with another process. So I bought myself
How
a...
thick was the crystal? How thick was it?
Oh, they're pretty thick. I didn't measure them, I can get that, I think it's in the book. This crystal on this one that's being passed around is actually a prototype crystal sapphire. It's got a sapphire crystal with a red filter. Pulsar used a sapphire crystal with a red filter underneath. Hewlett-Packard bonded it, they made 4, I got one from a friend. Typically it was mineral glass, red. So what I have, does anybody remember Summit Calculator Company?
Yes.
I have about 20, 30 of those. They're the cutest little cigarette packets with the clicks-on keyboards. And they have a art magnifying glass for the LED display. So I have a bunch of these that are just totally garbage. They're never restored because the battery pack was sealed inside. And I pulled one of those off, templated, cut it. This is my magnifying one. It's my seeing eye HP. But on the other hand, I've also made them out of LED clocks. You just pull the filter off an LED clock, happens to be the same thickness. Now I like plastic or armored plexiglass because you get a scratch and polish it out. You throw your HP in your wife's jewelry box and the next thing you know there's diamonds scratching. Well, I don't know, she doesn't have diamonds. I give her glass. Anyhow, that's on it. Are you recording this again? Yeah. So I'm going to play with the case. I'm going to put the finish back on it. There are different ways. I didn't have a lathe at the time, so that's just plasticine with the case back embedded, centered, put on my drill chuck, and then I turn her on and I put 400 grit sandpaper, 600 grit, 1000 grit. Put the circular grain in, put on the polishing edges. That's just something that's you can do on your own. If you talk to Tony Toole, he'll just stick a screwdriver through it because he just wants them working. He doesn't care if they're looking good. So that's what it looked like when it was done. And in fact, that's the magnifying display. So this is what I did to the case, this is what I did to the guts. This one actually functioned without doing anything except cleaning up the circuit, we're stopping the corrosion. I love that product. I know we're deoxide gold. Anybody heard of that? The deoxide compounds. That is amazing. I've actually resurrected an integrated circuit by letting it wick underneath and just sit there for a while, and then not knowing, come back and a week later, it's working. And the only thing I did was put the deoxide gold underneath. So this is a standard display. You see how thick that lens is? And I don't know where the watches are. Are they making their way across? Or okay, so you can see how thick they are. There's the back of that bashed up stainless steel back. And this is the neat part. Now there's the HP logo. It's missing the little stylus, but the stylus is in that strap. When it goes around, you take a look.
It was.
So, it was. They're $250 for those styluses. Just the stylus. So it looks like we're off topic here. But remember my talk last year on Woodstocks? Was anybody not here last year? Dave, you weren't, but I've sent you all the links. The Woodstocks had a guy, take a look at this. Is that the odd one out? Anybody ever seen a Woodstock with a right justified display? Well, Bernhard Ems in Germany has, I won't go over it because I did a whole talk last year. You can see the HHC 2015, and I have the talk on my computer if you want that downloaded. He's come up with a replacement. He loves LED HP. And he's always wanted an HP-01 watch. So Bernhard Ems has done it again. Now that didn't look like that on my computer. I'm not taking marks off mine because my computer didn't do that. Anyway, this is the box and the paperwork that you can find in the box. So what has Bernhard done? That's one of the original advertisements for HP. That's what the watch looks like. A little bit of graphics. There's the original board. Here's Bernhard's board. Now I'm going to pass that around, but I'm going to ask you to be very careful because it comes in the unfolded, and the wires, it doesn't want to be bent. You probably get 2 or 3 bends when you fold these two packages back together to fit in the watch.
We'll test that.
Pardon me? Yeah, we'll test that. Okay, make sure Eric doesn't get it. So this is Bernhard's new module. You can see the resemblance on the keyboard. Rested from the original display. Of course, you're going to take the original display off, find the VCC, and then you're going to go through each segment. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. There are 83 segments. I think there are 83 segments, if you count the Colemans and everything else. Beautiful package. You've got to use this, that little insulator, and those. You get the hard part's taking it off. You need a hot air, an SMD soldering system. You have to protect
Solder.
the... you guys, what an audience. You're an inspiration, but you're a pain in the neck. So,
I thought it was neat.
pardon me?
Pain in the neck.
Pain in the neck, yeah, it's a booth, time to say that.
Okay.
Just a little update. There's the integrated circuits. This is courtesy of Bernard's. He did some close-ups. He actually sacrificed a working watch to do this. Those are the ICs sandwiched in between the boards. The boards are porcelain. They're epoxy. Eric now knows this. You use the heat gun. You melt the epoxy. You make sure you open it on the hinge side, opposite the hinge side where the rivet is. Another picture of the close-up of the wire bonds. Do not look at them, they fall off. Do not breathe on them, they fall off. Do not play with them, think about them, or do anything with these wire bonds, they fall off. So, this is what you get with Bernhard's. Yes, sir?
That because of core.
No, that's because they are 1/1000th the eyelash. They're just fragile. This is.
But a good gold wire.
Oh, it should. But also, what's happened with this watch? They're porous. The porcelain's porous. The batteries have rotted. As a matter of fact, the pulsar that you're seeing was sent to Germany to a friend of mine who had to wire bond 8 of the wire bonds back into place on the LEDs with new technology. It was worth it because the watch with this box and everything is rather valuable now. So you get that. There's the module I'm handing around. Surprise, surprise. 2 batteries, not 3. Still silver oxides. These batteries will last 5 years if the watch is never turned on. They'll last about 2 years on a normal display usage, which gave the original 6 months display worth. The little capacitor here is for laziness. These 2 batteries are driving the display on the original, but these 2 on this drive the display and the CPU. So, they're counting the base when you set the watch and you start it. This is not used. Do not put a battery there. However, when you're pulling these batteries out, he says, place in this capacitor, let it sit for a minute. Then when you take those 2 batteries out, the capacitor has enough current to allow you to put 2 new batteries in and not have to reset the watch. Now the interesting thing about Bernhard's watch, and I'm going to let you, this is part of the package when you come by because this was all late last minute talk. So it's not on your thumb drive, but I have it all here for you to go on. It takes about a minute, if that, per thumb drive. If you read the manual, there are about 5 extra functions. One of them is a 45-character alpha hello message, which can be your full name, which it comes from him. It'll be programmed with your name and your address and your phone number. It also will display other alphas. It's more accurate than the original. The technology will last more than 5 years with rotted batteries or etc. It's an unbelievable package. There's the other side. So you see his battery side contact, his keyboard, and this is hidden underneath. The hardest thing here is once you have the LED package off, you want to make sure when you solder one leg of the LED in, make sure it's lined up, solder the other half, the other end, and then fill it in. Just like doing an HP-01 or any other kind of display. Otherwise it'll be crooked and I'm OCD and I can't look at my watch at an angle. It's got to be straight. Here's some of the extra features. You get a revision and a serial number. He comes up with an update in the software. You pull the module out. There are 4 points there. You'll update the software package. You get an HP logo if you hit the shift key, and I think you hit shift key twice. You get the HP-01 logo coming up. The operating time he describes here at 18,000 button pushes, how many years you'll get out of it. There's the name of the address. It is 48 characters, not 43. So you'll see something like that. I had to hack that. So, is there an HP guy here? Jason,
Sir,
how about my new batteries?
I'm sorry, do you need batteries?
Well, I got this with my HP-01 in 1975, and I never submitted it, and I'd like some new batteries, please.
Mail it in then, huh?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I got 4 of those cards. So, unbeknownst
My
to...
desk and it won't be coming back.
Okay, so, unbeknownst to Radio Shack, they have a guarantee in the old days on their batteries.
Yeah.
Buy a silver oxide battery, get a year guarantee for an extra $1. So Geoff went, wait a second here. These things die on the originals every 6 months. I'm going to buy a set of 3 and see what happens. So for 4.5 years, I never paid for batteries. Then suddenly somebody's flagged my name. Yes!
You're the reason Radio Shack went bankrupt.
Yes! Yes! It's now Circuit City, and they don't carry 357 battery guarantees. So, that is the end of that discussion on the HP-01, but I have some updates on Panamatic and Bernhard's newest acts, his new act revisions for your woodstocks. This, if you remember from last year, was woodstocks in the 21st century. Those are the woodstocks, we saw that picture earlier. Uh-oh, blank screen. So you might have remembered this little thing. How to take that calculator with a dead act and these tools and how to install it, but under the scotch. Anyway, how do you install it? And that says, hello, prof. That's an HP-25. I did what type of scotch? Chivas Regal blended 18 year.
I remember the last year's talk, and scotch was like vital in...
Yes, it was, very vital. So how do you go from here to here? That's the talk last year for the ones that didn't see it. Well, here you go. Bernhard's new act. So the act is the same. I'll let you refer to the old act talk from last year. There's the booklet. What is it?
Hey, Geoff? I don't know, it's kind of a hard act to follow.
It is a hard act to follow. I was going to say that to the very end, and unfortunately I can't now. Look at this. This is your HP 21, 25, 27, 29, 67, 91, 92, 95, 97. That's it. It's now, mine are all infrared printing. One of them is going to be GPS soon.
If you got 19C.
So every single one of those. Oh, it is. It's right there, but thank you.
Where's the 95?
So was somebody. Go home. Go home. So that act of Bernhard's will resurrect every single one of these. Not only will it resurrect the act, it will resurrect the ROM chip and the RAMs. So if your ROMs and RAMs are dead, it'll resurrect. Or you can use the onboard ROM embedder by selecting it and only the act. Now the interesting thing is, on the HP-25, the HP-25 had some alpha characters embedded in the coding. For example, they have to embed error, they have to embed running or whatever that they have. And they had some other characters embedded. They had HP embedded, but they never used it like it was going to have. So if you turn Bernhard's on, he has actually reclaimed about 18 characters in the English alphabet. Of course, there's the standard boobies. 8088135. So Bernhard says, and here's what I'm going to do. I love the 29. That's my favorite LED calculator. 98 lines of programming. Bernhard's act gives you 30 98-line programs to the flash, safe, which are callable, and you can separate the programs and make them mergeable. He's got a whole bunch of other stuff, but we'll go to the act to do that. The problem is the HP-29 sacrificed some of those characters that the HP-25 had, the alpha characters, for memory. So he can't generate a perfect, whoops, I gotta go back because I don't want to ruin that joke. He can't generate north, south, east, west on a 29. So what you do is you grab a 25 board, you pull it out, you put his act in, you flash it for a 29, you put it in a 29 shell, you add his GPS, and you have the act chip access the HP-25 ROM where those characters are, because they're not in the 29 ROM. but you use the new Act flash with a 29C. Conversely, get yourself a 21 or a 25 and get one of his overlays. In fact, we were talking about 34C overlay. You can turn a 21 into a 34C. These are his overlays, and one's a 34. So you can pretty well do anything you want. I'm going to have the world's one of 3 now, GPS, and on top of that, the GPS coordinates are accessible in your programming. So if you can actually pull your present position, Gunter, pull your final position, calculate, I know it's a little late to find out how far you're going once you've arrived, but regardless of that, it's also an active display. It'll show you your mileage as you're going, it'll show you your coordinates as you're going. It's all displayed in real time. You know, it's just absolutely fascinating. So, there is the GPS, there's the IC, there's the actual receiver, shielding. It goes inside the case. He explains it to you in the manual, etc. I have a question, Gunter.
Not a question. I just want to add that Bernard refused my suggestion to add an atomic clock to this.
Okay. Well, here's what it does. If you are receiving this, your update is via satellite. The satellite is via what? Binary Jim Johnson. Binary encoding, our HC, our digital clocks that we have. What do we call it? The heat kit.
GC-1000.
GC-1000, world's most accurate clock. HF, I never knew this. All these years I've been listening to the WWV, and they actually have encoded binary coding in the shortwave. And you interpret that, and that gives that's how you can update your, I did not know that, but that's how all this updating takes place. So in fact, it does have a real-time clock here with Scott now. And another thing, you know how he trained or did all his coding for the HP-01? He did it on an HP-25 with his app. So he actually has a flash for your HP-25. Something says something. This is almost over.
Food time.
No, this is over 5 minutes. Not even 5 minutes. You ready? So, because I'm not explaining it. There you go. Thank you, Bernhard. Thank you, Eric. This wouldn't have been possible, of course. I mean, we keep saying this. We have this resource back there, which is unbelievable, and that's me, and that's my email. So, that leads me to the following question. And you two HP guys will get this. What does that sign say?
If we're not smoking, we're in trouble.
That's the sign on the crew bus on the way to the hotel in Hong Kong. No smoking penalty, $5,000. As far as I'm concerned, if we don't all light up, and there are 15 of us, we're going to be presented with a $75,000 fine for not smoking. And that's what happens when you try to talk to vendors in Hong Kong, Beijing, Shanghai. That. Thank you very much, guys.
Geoff, are you maintaining that you did that presentation on a layover?
I did that yesterday at the airport. No, not yesterday. I did that between 1 o'clock and my flight at 3.